Hello, everyone. You're going to be listening to this during the symposium in November, but I'm recording this a few weeks before that and hoping that by the time that we actually listen to this and come together as a virtual community and as a group, the world will not have have the more horrible things will not have happened. The topic that I'm going to be speaking about, my paper essentially, is titled Rising India, Falling Freedoms, Hindutva Visions of Dissent and Democracy. And as you all will already know, if you have been following India, or indeed, I mean, as one manifestation of what's going on with the global right wing, that Hindutva is an ideology of majoritarian nationalism draws significant sustenance from the idea that this is about making India great again, to use American formulation. And in that sense, it's a project, I argue, that is both post-colonial, neoliberal, and nationalist at the same time. So far from the traditional understanding of neoliberalism and nationalism as opposing forces, this is a project that is nationalist, clearly majoritarian nationalist. It claims to not be neoliberal, but it is. And we have seen that over the last few years, since 2014 especially, which is the period that I'm referring to, and post-colonial, not in the sense that a post-colonial, but in the sense that it is something that, as a political project, it works with imaginaries of pride and futurity, so that the party in this case, and with all its kind of ideological Sangh Parivar, the family of Hindutva organizations, promise a return to the glorious past as future. And thereby, they're doing very contradictory things, because on the one hand, they claim to be making India a rising power. And yet, at the same time, objectively, when one looks at all of the indicators, from press freedoms to religious freedom to many others, India has been declining in all of those rankings. And the decline, of course, most recently, as you know, the democracy, the ranking of Indian democracy has also gone down. And what is this project about? Well, this project, the Hindutva Project, that is, as I said, a Hindu supremacist project. Its followers claim, those who subscribe to this political project, as exemplified, and the kind of the manifestation of this is the right-wing party, the BJP, that won the elections with Prime Minister Modi in 2014 and was re-elected in 2019, that those who follow this project, for them, this is simply a project of pride. It is pride about India as a Hindu nation, and it is pride about and as a rising nation, rising power, and it's pride that, look, we are a democracy, but we are also a Hindu country, and we should take pride in that. And those others in the country who are not Hindu should somehow still subscribe to the overarching idea of India as a Hindu nation. And that, implicitly there's the understanding that the rights of other minorities are not derived from their status as individual rights-bearing subjects of a state, but that they are dependent upon the benevolence of the majority community. And in that sense, it's a socially conservative project with very kind of regressive communitarian sorts of echoes along the lines of the Hindu community being the dominant one. So, the fact that citizenship, the idea of what it means to be an Indian citizen, is very much has become ever more central to this project, was exemplified with the Citizenship Amendment Act, which provided a religious route into citizenship, as it were, because non-Muslim, people from specified neighboring countries could apply for asylum in India, apply for citizenship in India, but not Muslim citizens of those countries. And then there was also the NRC, the National Register of Citizens, and you might have heard about the sorts of statelessness that it kind of enforced, and the people who had to be sent to the camps in states like Assam, in the northeastern part of the country. So citizenship is very much this contestation around this project. The contestation with this project is very much around the idea of who is the Indian citizen. And in that, there is the idea that an Indian citizen, there's almost like a hierarchy and a cascade of worth. And at the top is this Hindu male Indian who is, kind of the norm, the unmarked, to use the sociologist Zerubbabel's formulation, the unmarked identity, the one that's taken as the norm. And Muslims and Christians or Dalits or others are marked in specific ways, and they have to demonstrate their goodness and their worth to be citizens. And that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is more sinister, of course, which is that not only do they have to demonstrate their worth, they're actively targeted. And that this active targeting of citizens has played out at its most kind of obvious with the securitization of dissent. So those citizens who dissent dissent is basically punitively treated across a range of institutions, as there is a decline of anything like what we might call liberal democratic rights. So the wider backdrop to this at its broadest is the work on critical thinking and totalitarianism, that relationship that, for instance, Arendt talked about, that totalitarianism, the steps towards and the kind of the flourishing of totalitarianism involves a decline in critical thinking first. And in that sense, that is why universities and the media and social media and judiciary and all of the other kinds of bits of society where critical thinking you would think that there would be critical thinking, are under attack in one way or another. So therefore we see an undermining of independent media, objectively demonstrated through the fall in the press rankings, judiciary, civil society, NGOs, activists, political opponents, the role of the police in all of this. There's also attacks on heritage and architectural legacies, as with the kind of wholesale remaking of the center of Delhi. It's a very regressivist, nativist project, which places as its various kinds of identities, and the Muslim identity is the prime kind of othered identity. I've in Society in Space last year in 2020 also written on Islamophobia. So I've written on Hindutva and Islamophobia and these right-wing dynamics in India and globally for several years. And and in terms of Islamophobia, we see that there are various levels at which, so there's the kind of the Indian Muslim as the suspect citizen, the Kashmiri Muslim as this kind of latent terrorist already. There's this Pakistan as a state, as this kind of existential absolute other of the nation state. And then there are the refugees, such as the Rohingya Muslim refugees, who are seen as, who have been previously referred to by the current home minister as termites, and in that kind of dehumanizing, animalizing language. So Muslims are this kind of absolute other. Now, within that, so as they are targeted, and we, it's kind of very hard to summarize all this in a lecture. But if I just briefly, because what I want to eventually then do is also talk about this way in which we can sort of substantiate why is it Muslims, because the way they do that is through targeting Muslims through the use of the word jihad. But before I come to that, let me just give you a couple of examples. So you have seen the ways in which the farmers' protests that have been ongoing have been treated recently. Most recently, there has been a case where it is alleged that a BJP UP Uttar Pradesh minister's son was in one of the vehicles that actually intentionally kind of came speeding from behind and mowed down the protesters. You would have, I don't know if you've read some of these other news, but I do want to tell you about in terms of the securitization of dissent, in different parts of the country at different times, appointments of heads of institutions that must subscribe to a Hindutva ideology. So not in every case, but I'm saying that, and it's not possible, but there is evidence. If you read, like, heads of institutions, prominent institutions belong to RSS, the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, which is the ideological parent of the ruling party, the BJP. And with 2019 elections, that agenda, the Hindutva agenda of the BJP became quite clearer, as opposed to the 2014 elections when development talk was still somewhere on that, somewhere there. Now what we see is that in spite of economic performance and every other indicator show, kind of going down, and you have the UP elections in the most populous state next year. In spite of that, people continue supporting the party because of this kind of othering, ideological kind of anti-Muslim Islamophobic talk, and also because of the way in which it kind of creates this majoritarian supremacist identity. So there have been intimidations of people, cancellations of talks, intimidations of speakers at universities, formal and informal, so legal and vigilante means to stifle free speech, online trolling, credible threats to dissenters, in universities like Jamia Millia in Delhi, or JNU in Delhi, or Hyderabad, various kinds of cases where student activists are imprisoned. Omar Khalid, for example, has still been in prison. There are many others who have at various times either are or have been in prison. Some of them still are: Sharjeel Imam, Aisha Ghosh was, Nitasha Narwal, Safura Zargar. So students, there's the disappearance of the Muslim JNU student Najib, who disappeared, and where was Najib is still a question that people ask. Then there's been and these are not people, so for instance Umar Khalid, they're not people who are always charged, or the cases are caught. They're just, it's kind of like the detentions and this process as the cases go along is a punishment in itself. There was at one point also talk of any seminars or academic events involving anyone overseas to require the Ministry of External Affairs permission. That was eventually withdrawn. At various times, bans on books, changes to textbooks, legitimization of non-scholarly right-wing voices and scholars within institutions in order to give credibility to the suppression of speech in the name of free speech. There are, in various kinds of research areas and fields that would align with a Hindutva sort of thinking, which is often anti-science, for instance, promotes, kind of cow science or Vedic science, or various kinds of fake corona cures, those kinds of things being taken seriously. The use of political labeling, so the rhetoric of urban naxals, of various kinds of secular people, to vilify those who identify as secular or those who are dissenters, to call them urban naxals being the insurgents. So these are just insurgents, and this kind of anti-national labeling. At one point in one ministerial meeting, suggestion that journalists ought to be color coded in terms of whether they are pro or anti the government or fence sitters. Several international organizations have issued statements, academic organizations, about this attack on academic freedom, on universities, on the judicial quietude has also been widely remarked upon, and so these repressions of democratic rights to dissent are multifaceted. They are multi-pronged, and it's a strategy of systematically crushing, often using the idea of free speech in order to crush dissent. And democracy, therefore, continues to be undermined as we go along this road, and it's shifting the common sense within the country around this project and this leader and this party, which is projected as if it can brook no alternative. So so there are these statements that become very popular, one of which is, if not Modi, then who? As if there is no leader in a country there cannot possibly be any leader in a country of over 1 billion people. And this indoctrination that uses everything from brute force, whether it's the police in the context of the country, or the military, or the armed forces in the context of the country. It can use brute force. It can use, the corporate kind of the influence of corporate cronies. It can use the influence of, it can use the pattern of appointments, and therefore this process is complex, and yet very transparent, in that, if there were to be empirically a consideration of everything that's happening, it would become very obvious that what is happening here is a slide into illiberalism, to say the least, and in the future, some kind of of a state that is reminiscent of where these projects go. And I kind of don't even want to kind of, name it. That's how worrisome it is. And these dynamics get exacerbated by the day. And in that, the important thing is that this kind of this other, this idea, this fear, this existential fear that has been engendered in people, is this idea of the absolute other. So that this idea of love jihad, I don't know if people listening to this have heard of it, but it's the idea that anything that Muslims do, that Muslim citizens in India do, is some form of subversive, anti-national jihad activity. Now, of course, this is not the conventional kind of spiritual, religious reading of even the meaning of the word. But the idea is that if Hindu women and Muslim men are marrying, then that is a love jihad. That is the use of love as a means of jihad. If there are Muslim bangle sellers in a Hindu community area, or vegetable sellers, then that's a vegetable jihad. And most recently, an academic in one of the university colleges in Delhi made the statement, there's a Marx jihad, that students from Kerala who are, coming there. And so any activity of Muslims, whether that's marrying, falling in love, trying to earn a livelihood, enroll in institutions, anything becomes into corona. So Muslim gatherings, that, the spread of corona, it's actually corona jihad. So every single activity, every single dimension of a person's life can get interpreted along the lines of, oh no, this is all systematic, everything is a threat. And this ontological kind of insecurity that is created against the Muslim other then becomes, the rationale, the raison d'etre of the regime to be able to push forward with policies that otherwise, with democratic deliberation, would be seen clearly for what they are, attacks on the rights and freedoms of people. But it's the fact that the common sense has been shifted, and there's this kind of almost anti-insurgency thinking in terms of the very idea of who the citizen is, and this insecurity that it has led to in the lives of those who do not have the privilege of a Hindu surname is palpable. That one reads about people who hesitate to disclose their names or carry any visible religious markers if they do not belong to the mainstream religious community. And this is it's a constructivist project. It's a project that has been unfolding over a long period of time, and it has created its vision of India, which is not the secular nationalist earlier vision, with all its failures and problems. It's a very Hindu nationalist vision of the country and of what democracy should be, which is why, you have people, including the ministers, speak of, oh, well, there are human rights, but, we have our own kind of indigenous understanding of human rights, and that's different. Rights and responsibilities come together, and, and rights are responsibilities. And so they'll kind of use all kinds of semantics and verbal calisthenics to twist things around and present it as if, democracy, but like our kind of democracy, human rights, but our kind of human democracy. So it's in that sense, the appeal to indigeneity, as an anti-colonial move, anti-Western in this case, that, stronger, we're going to be better and stronger than the West kind of move, is used in order to entrench regressive logics. And, and at the same time, hide its own, kind of obfuscate its own contradictions, because, I've argued in a different paper that is about Kashmir and Xinjiang. What is the idea of the West here? The idea of the West in their sense is not economic. It's clearly that, the West is somehow about human rights. So, well, I'm sorry, how come aren't there human rights violations that happen or carried out by the West? So it's very selective and problematic and contradictory in lots of ways. But, as with many of these projects globally that have unfolded in multiple countries, and in my a different paper on misogyny and authoritarianism, misogyny of authoritarians in contemporary democracies, I characterize this as, it's kind of like electorally legitimated misogynist authoritarians who come to power claiming to challenge neoliberalism, who claim a monopoly on nationalism, electorally legitimated misogynist authoritarians who claim a monopoly on nationalism, denounce their critics and all dissenters as anti-national, uh, and claim to challenge neoliberalism, yet at the same time thrive on crony capitalism and promote crony capitalism, which is it's the it's kind of like it's the formula that I see. That is what these projects are, and in the in the Indian case, as I have briefly tried to outline here, they have sought to manage democratic dissent by suppression and by political labeling and othering. And in that, the paradigmatic other of the normative Indian citizen is this kind of Indian Muslim subject. And this is a project that needs to be understood, analyzed, and it needs to be thought through ever more by people who are not just people there, but globally, because this is a project that also, the Hindutva Project of this kind, like all supremacist projects, seeks to build global links, diaspora links, and in more recent work I've talked about that the paradoxes and entanglements of this kind of thing, whereby you have the diaspora validating views, validating this, and being used within the country. This is why those political spectacles that Modi did with Trump, that are selectively projected back to followers to say, look, there's nothing unusual about this. The whole world loves our one nation, one leader, one party, and we're a huge success. It's in that sense, it's agnotological. It's kind of deliberately maintaining a facade of an ignorance at the same time as it's pushing its ideological goals. And I hope that that during our actual symposium we are going to speak further and discuss these questions. Thank you.